Madam President, there have been a lot of questions about when you're going to sit down for your first interview since being the nominee. Do you have any update on that?
I've talked to my team. I want us to get an interview together before the end of the month. Thank you.
It has been 39 days since Kamala Harris announced her presidential campaign, and she is yet to do an official interview. Well, it has been announced that she will finally do one, but not just any interview. It's a joint interview between her and her running mate, Tim Walz. She's got a lot of questions to answer, and she has a lot of problems to solve. But before we get to those clips, let's at least understand what's going on here.
After a very successful 6 weeks here since she became the Democratic nominee, coalesced the party behind her, raised a ton of money, injected enthusiasm, got a running mate, pulled off a convention. All of that, though, Alex, very scripted. Now, a couple other things coming up. They said they were going to schedule an interview, a sit-down interview, an extensive interview before the end of the month. That now is happening on CNN with our colleague Dana Bash, our anchor and chief political correspondent, down in Georgia. Harris and Walz are going on this bus tour starting tomorrow in Georgia. The interview will take place on Thursday. It will air as a primetime special at 9 p.m. Eastern here on CNN on Thursday. And as you noted, it is, of course, the first joint interview that the Democratic nominee and the vice presidential nominee are doing together. But it's also her first interview, the vice president, as the Democratic candidate. This is the first time she's going to take questions in a concerted effort like this in an interview format since Joe Biden 6 weeks ago upended this entire race by making that historic decision to bow out of his campaign, endorse his vice president, Kamala Harris, and that sent her on to these last 6 weeks here. And there are a lot of questions that have been lingering out there for her to answer as we go into this fall campaign.
Okay, so he has alluded to, I think, which is the biggest problem or weakness in her campaign, and that is how everything has been scripted, right? Everything's been manufactured. Everything is artificial. None of it is truly organic. But she has multiple problems, starting with this one.
Is the line now going to be, well, why isn't she doing it by herself?
Yeah, I do think people are going to bring that up. Look, I have great confidence in Dana and CNN to do this. I think it's incredibly weak sauce to show up with your running mate. The fact that they don't have enough confidence in her to let her sit herself, the actual top of the ticket, and do a single interview. In fact, I think the hand-wringing and the gyrations over this over the last month show a troubling lack of confidence in her political ability, which also makes you wonder as a voter, well, what kind of president would you be if this kind of a small-time decision, can we do an interview or not, what does that look like for your decision-making process, so on? So, I think Republicans are going to think it's pretty weak to show up with effectively someone to take up half the time.
Yeah, so that was Scott Jennings. And it makes me think that if I was a swing voter, someone that I was not committed to Trump or her, and I'm trying to make a decision, the big thing that would stand out to me is obviously the economy and how prices are high. And she has yet to come out and speak on any of that as far as substance on what she's going to do about it. It's been a lot of vague statements. I do know that Trump, when he was the president, prices were lower. I do know that. But what really troubles me, if I take a step back and look at the overall big picture here, how could someone be the commander in chief and they can't do interviews with local media? I don't understand that in their own country. But we expect this same person to be able to debate, negotiate, at worst, annihilate our enemies. I don't see how that math makes sense. So I agree. It is weak sauce, especially when they choose to do the interview the way that they're doing it, as John Levine pointed out here.
But I want to talk about this interview that she's going to do. I'm concerned that it appears that it's going to be taped. We don't know if it's going to be edited, but we should be able to hear the Democrat presidential candidate for the first time since she's running actually go live and hear what she has to say, hear all the laughs, hear the stutters, hear it all without edit.
You can't trust the press with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. If this is not a live interview, I don't buy it. I mean, we all remember when Donna Brazile gave the questions to Hillary Clinton in advance and her team. So they clearly want her to win. And if it's not a live interview, you can't trust it. Now, it's going to be taped. Is it going to be edited or not edited? We don't know. And I don't know if they've told you or not. But even if they say it's not edited, if you don't get it right out of the horse's mouth, I don't buy it. I never will.
I wouldn't either. See, that's the thing about former President Trump. You may hate him or love him, but you know what you're going to get. You're going to get someone who's straight with you, right? He's going to tell it like it is. And that's a gift and a curse as a politician, right? That's why he gets so much media attention. There's why he is probably the most criticized, persecuted politician in history, because he's not afraid to go in front of a mic and say what he is thinking. However, on her end, she's literally the polar opposite of him. She wants to hide from the media. She doesn't want to say anything off script. And if this interview is going to be taped, will it be edited? These are phenomenal questions. And this is CNN, by the way. And we know CNN does not like Trump. However, Dana Bash was fair in the debate between Trump and Biden. Will she be fair again? I hope, but I'm not going to give them the benefit of the doubt, because if she was to be fair, this would do a lot of damage to her campaign. All you have to do is just look at where the poll numbers are right now.
But the other point about polling, if possible, let's talk about that a little bit, because I think let's put this in perspective. On this day in 2020, Joe Biden was up 7.1% above Donald Trump in the Real Clear Politics average. And at this point in 2016, Hillary Clinton was up 6.3. And as you remember, the election came down to a handful of votes in a handful of states. And today, in the Real Clear Politics average, Harris is up over Trump by 1.5 in the RCP average and 3.5 in the 538.com. So this, she's ahead in both averages, but she's nowhere near ahead by the numbers that both Biden and Clinton were. And as we know, Clinton lost and Biden won by 42,000 votes in 3 states.
So let's add it up here. It's a candidate who did not run a primary, who did not debate for the position, who was ultimately just chosen in a back room somewhere, who has avoided media attention for over a month, whose poll numbers are not as good as Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton, and she's running against someone who was persecuted, convicted. They tried to bankrupt him. They tried to impeach him twice, and he was also nearly assassinated. And this is what the poll numbers are showing. So in my opinion, I would say her campaign is actually weak if I'm comparing it to Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton. So I think she really has some serious problems here. And that's why this interview is either going to make those problems bigger or possibly make them smaller. It just depends on how it goes. And that's why you have Democratic strategists saying the same thing.
I think it was kind of an unforced error. I don't know why they've made this into such a big deal. Had she been giving interviews throughout the course of the last couple of months or the last 6 weeks, I think this would not be that big of a deal. Look, if I were in her shoes, I would do an interview with local press. She's traveling to Georgia. She's traveling all over Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and other places. And I think the best thing for her to do would be to speak to local media in those states, because we know that media is very much trusted when it's local media, the people that are neighbors with the very people whose votes she wants.
Yeah. So in another way of explaining this interview is set with some high expectations because she hasn't done any, right? And when you haven't done any, there's so much pressure on this interview. And so will she deliver? Will she not? Who knows? I like to look at recorded history. I don't believe she will. Or what will happen is CNN will be very soft with their questions so that she can just do enough. And that's what they've done with Joe Biden. They don't push back on him. And whenever someone from the mainstream media pushes back on them, they get a lot of backlash. So I like to see what actually happens. Now, what's interesting is that there's a lot of things that she can do to cover up this weakness and solve these problems. But I don't believe it's going to be in the way that we probably think she should do, which is just to be straight up and honest and take responsibility and take on the hard questions. However, Scott Jennings did make a great point with this take.
If I were counseling them, I would say, pick somebody and go in and be prepared to face the discrepancies in your record. You've got all these anonymous press statements now saying you don't support any of the stuff you used to support. You're going to have to tackle it head on. That's number one. Number two, she's going to have to say Joe Biden made some mistakes. I mean, she can't run on Biden's record. She can't run on his plan. She's going to have to show up and say, he did this, this, and this. I disagreed, but he's number one. I'm number two. I've learned from the experience. If she's not willing to do that, she's going to wear Biden. It's going to make it hard to win. Because if she isn't willing to separate on a specific policy issue or two or a decision, Trump's going to have her for the rest of the fall basically as a continuation of the Biden agenda.
Yeah, I mean, that's what she has to do. She has to separate herself from Joe Biden sooner or later, because if she doesn't, then people will see her as Joe Biden 2.0. And so this interview that's going to drop tomorrow is going to be a big one. And I can't wait to see what happens. So as I wrap up, final points for you guys. Number one, huge mistake on her campaign to not prepare her for such a high stakes interview and a high stakes debate. What I mean by that is, why not just allow her to take some type of questions, even if you just told the reporter, hey, you can only ask her 2 questions and then you got to keep moving, right? Something like that to get her to deal with the pressure of answering questions, even if she doesn't answer them to the best of her ability. Practice with her dealing with the pressure. And listen, the fact that this is a conversation about someone who could potentially become the commander in chief, it is a problem. But I'm just saying, if I was running her campaign, that's what they should have been doing this entire time. Point number 2, this election is definitely Trump's to lose, because after everything that has happened, his numbers have not dipped. His poll numbers have not dipped. His approval rating has not dipped. I mean, people know what they're going to get with Trump. What they don't know necessarily is what they're going to get with Kamala Harris, because no one knows who Kamala Harris is. Remember, when someone is the vice president, they're not getting the same media attention as the president. So she comes out of the woodwork. These swing voters don't know who she is. They barely even know where she's from. So that is an issue for her, and it's also an issue for Trump, because they both are tasked with the same thing, which is defining her. And point number 3, I truly believe it is more likely, and I might be wrong, but I believe it's more likely that we will have a Joe Biden moment in her campaign sooner or later. Whether it is an off-the-cuff interview that will happen sooner or later, or it will be at the debate, it might be at the interview. I think it's more likely that will happen. And when I say Joe Biden moment, I'm meaning it's such a mess up that you leave scratching your head about, how did she become the nominee in the first place? I really do believe she will be the person that will make a fatal mistake first versus Donald Trump. Now, there's a chance she won't, but I think it's more likely she will. That is my mindset. What about you? What do you guys think about this announcement that she's finally doing an interview, a joint interview with her and Tim Walz, and it's going to be with CNN Dana Bash, who was fair, by the way, between Trump and Biden in that debate, but will she be fair again? I want to know what your guys' thoughts are and more in the comment section below. Thank you for checking out the video today. If you want to support the channel, grab yourself a t-shirt by going to the link in the description below. Stay grateful, stay focused, and stay true. Peace.